Thank you for making the time for us. Just speak for a few minutes, and then we got the winners. So, Elon, we have a room full of entrepreneurs here, and 30 of them, actually more than 30 of them, 30 launched on stage in the past few days, and then we had 200 more in the alley. And so for many of the people in the room, this is sort of day one for their entrepreneurial journey. Someone who has founded numerous companies and built them to billion-dollar companies. What advice do you have for anyone starting on day one? What can they expect?
Well, I think you expect it to be very difficult. There's a friend of mine, Bill Lee, who I think phrased it well. Starting a company is like eating glass and staring into the abyss of death. If that sounds appealing, go ahead.
Yeah? Why is that appealing?
Well, I think it's just going to be different for different people. In my case, the companies that I've started, I wanted to have a significant effect on the future of the world, or try to at least. And so it wasn't really from the perspective of figuring out what is the easiest way to make money, because that would have certainly ruled out rockets and electric cars. But it was really from the standpoint of what do I think are the important problems that have to be solved in order for humanity to have a bright future, and and certainly sustainable energy, both production and consumption, as well as space exploration, and ultimately, getting out there and exploring the stars. I think those are two major ones. I think the biggest problem that humanity faces in the 21st century is sustainable energy, terrestrially, and then the biggest problem of the sort of millennia is the extension of life beyond Earth. So I want to try to do as much as I can in that regard, even if it's not the easiest way to make money.
Right. So some of your former PayPal colleagues, Peter Thiel and Max Levchin, were sitting here earlier and were lamenting the fact that there weren't enough entrepreneurs really going after true innovation. I don't think anyone can accuse you of that. For many of the entrepreneurs here who are creating internet companies, right, for the most part, is that that has definitely been, or in the past decade, this crucible of innovation. Do you think that where are we in that cycle, or should they be looking elsewhere, like where you're looking?
Actually, I think for somebody who's just starting out as an entrepreneur, I think the internet is a great place to start. Because if you're just starting out, unless you've got a ton of capital that somebody gave you or you inherited or something, you have to start a company that requires a small amount of capital, where it's heavily weighted towards the intellectual capital in your head. So I think anything to do with sort of software and with the internet is a really good starting point. It would have been impossible for me to have done electric cars or rockets, right from the start, because those require money to get anything done.
And one thing, and if anyone wants to ask a question, we might be able to take one or two questions, and you can come right up here. Can you explain to me, how do you run a space company and an electric car company at the same time? Both of them seem like very challenging enterprises of their own right. Does it help you to do more than one? Or are you just juggling everything?
I'd say I would do it with great difficulty. It is quite hard.
Do you recommend running more than one company?
No, I don't recommend it. I tried to not run two companies, but then I didn't have a choice. I had to run both companies, or one of them would have failed.
Where are you with so Tesla? I think is an interesting example where your entry product was a very high-end product,
Yeah.
right? And then now you're going to have more of a mainstream product with this with the Model
S, yeah.
Model S sedan. What surprise did that work out as you had planned, or were there hiccups along the way that you weren't expecting?
Well, there were certainly many hiccups. That's an understatement. More like choking to death and barely surviving. So it was difficult. I mean, never having been in the auto business, it was impossible to predict all the issues that we would encounter ahead of time. You know, so we knew it would be hard, but we didn't know it would be as hard as it was. And then with the downturn in the economy, which particularly affected car companies, you know, General Motors and Chrysler went bankrupt. So it sort of really disproportionately affected the car business. That made it even more difficult.
It's still tough times. So do you feel like you're still in the valley, or where are you in that?
I actually feel very confident of Tesla's future at this point. I don't want to be complacent or overconfident, but I actually think it's in a really good spot.
Is SpaceX going to be our trucks to space that everyone wants?
Well, SpaceX is already slated to be the main replacement for the space shuttle.
Right.
And we'll be doing the first docking with the space station probably in December. Although with the recent Soyuz failure, that could get pushed to January or February, schedule somewhat in flux. But basically within the next 3 to 6 months, we should be docking with the space station, transferring cargo there and bringing science experiments back. And then in about 3 years or so, we expect to be carrying astronauts.
Wow.
And then in...
That's the real test, right?
No.
No?
No. Astronauts just biological cargo.
Make me nervous. Do we have questions?
So the problem we have with electric cars is that currently they're still plugged into coal generators. Do we need to reduce the cost of electricity or increase the amount of local solar generation to make the electric cars even more viable economically?
So he's asking, how do you make electric cars viable by thinking about the whole solution, but the generation side as well?
Right, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's why I sort of phrased it as sustainable energy rather than just cars, because you need to have sustainable production as well as sustainable consumption of energy. The good thing about electric cars is that it allows you to create energy via a number of renewable means, and then gain transportation by charging the car. But you do have to solve the sustainable power generation problem. That's what Solar City is about. Lyndon and Peter Rive at Solar City are doing a phenomenal job. Solar City is actually the largest provider of solar powered systems in the country.
All right.
In fact, and they just announced a deal to do solar panels on military housing, which will be more solar installations than have been done cumulatively in the United States to date.
Right.
By anyone.
So basically, you have to tackle both ends of the problem at the same time.
Yeah. You have to, exactly.
Do we have another question?
Hi, Elon. A lot of people consider you a visionary. Could you talk a little bit more about your vision for the future in the next maybe 20 and 50 years, what you see the world looking like then?
Well, on the energy side, I think by the midpoint of the century, I think solar power will be the single largest source of electricity. It may not be a majority, but it will be the single largest source in the combination of photovoltaic and solar thermal. And I think in about 20 years, a majority of all new cars manufactured will be purely electric. And 20 years after that, the installed base will have flipped over to the point where the vast majority of the cars on the road are purely electric. Because the installed base of cars turns over about every 12 to 15 years. So I think that's a pretty positive thing that will occur, which is going to require an enormous amount of work and investment and everything. But that's where I think things will end up.
We have time for one more question. Anyone have one last question right there? Yeah, come right in front here so Elon can look you in the face.
Hi, Elon. I would like to know your point of view about education, the future of education.
Sure. My point of view on the future of education, well, I can say what I think education should be more like, which is education should be more like an interactive game, and much less like what it is today, which is sort of a rather boring vaudeville act. You know, it's sort of one person kind of droning on in front of a bunch of others with no special effects, and you know, it's sort of like, if you think of the days of vaudeville, before there were movies or video games or anything, if you wanted to see a play, any given town would have a troupe of actors, but they usually wouldn't be that good. And now with movies, you take the best actors in the world, the best scriptwriters, best directors, special effects, you do multiple takes, and you make it really compelling. And that's why you want to sit down and watch a movie. That's how teaching should be. And then what teachers, there's still a role for teachers, but it should be to help people where they get stuck, as opposed to sort of, you know, just lecture at them from the front of a classroom. If that's helpful.
Okay, well, terrific. So, and one last question I'd like to ask you. You know, we're talking about these different areas: education, energy, you know, transportation. Do you think that it takes sort of, you know, extraordinary resources, like the types of resources that you were able to accumulate to tackle these areas, or do you think that any entrepreneur can tackle, you know, these areas just like any entrepreneur can, you know, can create a mobile, you know, mobile app or an internet, you know, service? We've been talking about like the cost to create an internet company has decreased, you know, and
Sure.
it's so cheap. In some of these other areas, the capital requirements are higher.
Yeah, absolutely.
Should that discourage people or not?
Well, I think the barriers to entry, the higher the capital requirements, the higher the barriers to entry. I mean, the reason why we haven't seen significant improvements in space transportation is because the barriers to entry is extremely high. Mm-hmm. You know, it's normally the province of governments and big governments at that. So when there are high barriers to entry, then you don't see the new entrants, and you don't see the innovation, because really the new entrants are what drive innovation. For entrepreneurs that don't have capital, they're really going to have a hard time starting a company in a high capital business.
Right.
It's possible, but in order to do that, you have to work at a company that does something comparable, so you have a convincing story to venture capitalists to give you quite a significant amount of money, rather than, you know, so instead of saying, say $3 million, you need, say, $30 or $40 million. It's a much higher hurdle.
Right.
So therefore, I think it's better to try doing something which requires low capital as kind of your first company. With the success of that, then take the capital from that and plow it into your second company. That's what I did, basically.
Right. Well, my view is that information technology can drive disruption in all these different industries, and it's sort of a low-cost way, perhaps, to do that. And then once you know, maybe you won't be as disruptive as creating an electric car, but you can still make some sort of progress in different industries like transportation and energy. And that might be a way to get your foot in the door.
Sure. It's basically just software as applied to those industries. Yeah.
Well, what a great way to end a conference on disruption. You know, internet entrepreneur, you know, trying to disrupt transportation, energy, space. Thank you for joining us. This really means a lot.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me.
Okay.